Good morning. How's everybody? I know it's kind of soggy out this morning, so thank you for coming. As Mary Lou mentioned, my name is Olivia. As you noticed from the videos, I am missing a couple of parts. I get reminded by people of this all the time, just in case there was any possibility that I forgot or have not noticed this. People will walk up to me in grocery stores, parking lots, restaurants, and just ask me, what happened to you? And, you know, people have stupid moments. I consider this to be one of people's not thinking moments. I have mine too. What people need to realize is that this is my normal. So sometimes I'm not thinking when they come up and do this, so I'm looking around for something out of the ordinary. Do I have a stain on my shirt? So I don't know what happened. So just to clarify, they'll say, well, you don't have any arms. Now, I don't want to discourage people from having conversations with people with disabilities, because there's always that fear of, well, what do I say when I go up to someone? How do I approach them? So I'm always polite, of course. I am friendly to people unless they give me a reason not to be. So I will explain to people that, you know, I was born without arms, answer how all the blah, 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 do you do this type of questions. But I get asked this probably at least weekly, if not more frequently than that. So it does wear on you after a while. I tend to be a very stubborn person, have a bit of tenacity, and with that comes a bit of a sarcastic streak. So in my head, I'm thinking, oh my God, really? I don't? I could have sworn they were there when I got up this morning. Thank you for your keen observation, stranger. You know, maybe we can go look for them now. And these types of conversations don't just wear on people with disabilities. They wear on families and caretakers too. When I was younger, I remember going someplace with my family one time, and there was this kid that was being particularly obnoxious. He was probably about the same age I was. I think maybe I was 10 at the time. And he was really wearing on me, I think visibly so, and my stepdad was just getting aggravated with him too, and finally he popped up with a question of, where are your arms? So not missing a beat, my stepdad chimed in, they're in the closet at home. And so the kid was just kind of had this shocked look on his face and kind of walked away in the discussion. But that wasn't a complete and total lie. Because doctors were trying to fix me when I was younger, and I did in fact have a prosthetic arm that they tried with me. I absolutely hated it. The novelty of it wore off in about 5 minutes. I used to sit there and just bend and straighten the elbow until the battery wore out and I could take it off. So most of the time it did actually sit in the closet at home. It used to kind of freak out my friends that came over and spent the night. They were afraid to actually open my closet because there was this weird arm sitting there that it wasn't me. There's this concept in American society that, you know, something tragic happened to us, that life is a tragedy. And that's not necessarily true. My life is not tragic. Nothing tragic happened to me. My life isn't necessarily worse because of my disability. I've accomplished more in my life than some people, not as much as others. Most of my challenges rarely are due to my disability. Most of my challenges that I face are due to society, a society that refuses to see me as an equal, a society that refuses to accept people with disabilities, to build barrier-free architecture, buildings, that refuses to just accept us into society. You know, life isn't necessarily worse. I've had ups and downs in my life, like everybody else. I've had relationships. I've been married. I've been divorced. I'm in a long-term relationship right now. I attended college, despite this perception that, you know, we are incapable of learning. I graduated cum laude. I worked and went to college at the same time. I I'm used to living with my disability. That I accomplished a long time ago. When I was born, my family was kind of wondering how I was going to do things. And my mom tells the story. She walked into my crib one day and I was holding my bottle with my feet. And she kind of went, well, okay, I guess you're going to figure this stuff out. And I have. What was surprising to me is that I lived through working full-time and going to college full-time. Looking back on that I'm wondering how I survived. I drive a car. As you saw in the video, I've been in a car accident that I was very fortunate to survive. Someone hit me. I did not hit them, by the way. It was not my fault. I recently turned 40 last month, and for my 40th birthday, I went skydiving. There's the picture from that. A year and a half ago, we went to Costa Rica with Zach's family, and I went ziplining in Costa Rica. That was actually from the Tarzan swing. See, I tried to get them to mute the video because I didn't want to include the scream, but they wanted to include the scream. As was mentioned in my bio, I've worked in policy and politics, and with that comes some job perks. So I've met some people, for nerds, they're kind of rock stars if you're a nerd. So I've met a former Secretary of State, Senator, First Lady, and presidential candidate, actually twice. So I met her when I was in high school and actually met her recently during the campaign. I met a former president who actually happened to be her husband, and I've met their daughter. I've met an actor turned senator, because gosh darn it, everybody likes him. And, if you watch Saturday Night Live, you know what I'm talking about. And an actor who played president. Where are my West Wing people? Right? But, these are kind of my job perks. That's what you get for working in policy and politics. The fact that we work 80 hours and, don't get paid very much for the things that we do. But the normalcy of my life, the averageness of it, actually makes me exceptional. Because average for people with disabilities in this country is, in fact, exceptional. Not very many people get to achieve that. Most of us still live in poverty. Do not get educational attainment. We are on wait lists for housing. We are on wait lists for medical services. The role model for disability exceptionalism, and you heard from him earlier, is this guy, Stephen Hawking. He is currently the smartest man on the planet. And he's ours. Ha! And given the nature of the way people have historically been referred who have disabilities, I consider that a little bit ironic, but it's also very empowering that we get to claim the smartest man on the planet. But he is not an example of American disability exceptionalism, although I will designate him an honorary member. But he's fortunate not to be an example of American exceptionalism, because if he were a U.S. citizen, the smartest man on the planet could be banned from voting in 39 states. And I just want to repeat that just so that sinks in. The smartest man on the planet in 2017 would be banned from voting in 39 states in the United States of America because of his use of assistive technology to communicate with other people. It has nothing to do with his cognitive abilities, but because of physical disabilities imposed on him by his disease. With disability rights, like any social movement, the pendulum is always swinging back and forth. We've had just as many laws passed that restrict our access as we've had laws passed to expand our access. In the United States, we've experienced restrictions on our movement When the United States was first founded, people with disabilities were barred from moving to the colonies. Up into the 1950s, people with disabilities were restricted from moving from state to state because we were considered a burden on states. We've experienced forced sterilization policies. The last one was actually in effect still in 1979 in Virginia, so within my lifetime. We've experienced infanticide in the United States because of the eugenics movement. But we've also had rehabilitation services put in place, which has been helpful to me. We have the vocational rehabilitation program that was put in effect to help veterans, but has also helped other people with disabilities. That is the program that has paid for the expensive modifications for my car that I would not be able to pay for by myself. The modifications are actually cost more than my car. We've had employment opportunities. Unfortunately, wars have been the biggest help to people with disabilities. It has expanded rights for veterans. When we have labor shortages, that's when we see the biggest increase in employment opportunities for people with disabilities. We've had access to healthcare and assistive technology expanded to us through vocational rehabilitation programs and due to expansion of healthcare through the Affordable Care Act. Disability rights really didn't begin to take shape and firmly become a mainstream issue in the United States until the 1960s, when we had kind of civil unrest with other civil rights movements. And that was really when the independent living movement took root, with Ed Roberts really considered the father of independent living. People with disabilities began protesting their exclusion from society and demanding control over their own services. And laws began to be passed to break down barriers for people with disabilities. So I'm not going to read all those off to you, but you can see the passage of laws that really began to just come through Congress to expand the rights and access to people with disabilities in society. I have really experienced this kind of expansion and contraction. I feel like I've lived in kind of alternate realities because this expansion and contraction of rights has kind of coexisted side by side in our society throughout history. Because of laws that were passed to expand education for people with disabilities, those passed right around the time I was born. So right around the time I was entering preschool is the time that people with disabilities were allowed into public school. So I did attend public school, but my education wasn't exactly equal. There were times when I actually ended up teaching myself more than I was taught by a teacher when I was in elementary school. I didn't get to attend the first school that I was zoned to attend until I hit high school, and that was due to the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, because my high school was a brand new school and had to be built to ADA building standards. I attended college, but my college was not fully accessible. They were trying, but I don't think they were necessarily trying as hard as they should have been. There were buildings that didn't have elevators. They had to move classes for me. We did have a disability services program, though, which once again we can credit the independent living movement for and Ed Roberts for having those services on my campus. I have always voted, and we passed laws to encourage voting for people with disabilities, but my polling location hasn't always been accessible. Mary Lou mentioned I use the chair sometimes, I walk sometimes, but other people don't have those options. So having inaccessible voting places prohibits a lot of people from voting. I have suffered the consequences of having pre-existing condition clauses and lifetime caps on insurance policies. I had knee surgery when I was 18, and insurance companies, as I was graduating and switching from college insurance programs into the workforce and employment insurance programs, and they didn't want to cover checkups for my knee and other health issues that started to pop up that they were relating to my disability. My story was actually included in congressional testimony on the need for healthcare reform in the United States, which led to the passage of the Affordable Care Act. But even with the passage of the Affordable Care Act, providers can still refuse treatment for me. I can't go to LabCorp or Quest Diagnostics and get my blood drawn. They can deny because they have to draw blood from my feet. And they say, well, that's a blood clot risk. So they can deny me services. So I have to go to the hospital to get lab work done. I owe my independence a lot to voc rehab programs because the car. So, things like that have really assisted me. But they're not great at employment programs. People with disabilities can still be paid below minimum wage in the United States. So they funnel people into programs such as Goodwill and Publix and really not into professional positions. So we're really lagging behind on those things. We are the largest minority. We have 57 million people with disabilities in this country. And one of the things that Ed Roberts really tried to push is that we should be voting as a block. But we are also an equal opportunity group. Anyone can join us at any time. We are not unified by age, by sex, by ethnicity, by race, by religion, by sexual orientation, or by political affiliation. The disability community tends to be politically apathetic. We are made up of Democrats, Republicans, and all of those views have valid reasons from a disability perspective. Republicans actually signed the Americans with Disabilities Act. And in Arkansas, a supermajority Republican state legislature actually expanded Medicaid for every person with a disability in the state of Arkansas. But of course, we all know Trump made fun of a person with a disability. Some people say, that was taken out of context. I've watched the video. He said, you got to see this guy, and made fun of the position of his arms. There's no taking that out of context. He's purposefully built buildings that were not ADA compliant because he knew because of court precedent he could get away with it. They wouldn't make him make accommodations after the fact. Democrats expanded health care on a national level, but excluded durable medical equipment in a compromise to pass the ACA. So things like hearing aids, power chairs don't have to be covered. They also gave us the first affirmative action program for employment, but it only covers federal government and federal contractors and did not trickle down to the states or city or county or private sector. So what can you do? One thing is disability etiquette is very important. So thinking before you speak. A lot of people think that it's a compliment to walk up to me and say, I don't feel so bad about my life having met you because other people have it so much worse. And I've had people walk up to me and say, good for you for not being ashamed to go out in public. Now, if somebody walked up to you and said that, would you take that as a compliment? So really, that's not very complimentary to us either. I don't mind if people ask if I need assistance. Please hold the door for me. Don't shut a door in my face. I hold doors for people too sometimes. But if you ask for assistance and we say no, no means no. We got it. I've been at this for 40 years and I know what my abilities are better than anybody else. I represent the entire disability community when I go out, and I don't know who you are. You could be an HR manager. And if you ask if I need help and I say no and you insist, I'm going to keep saying no. And I'm not doing that to be rude. I am doing that because I want you to remember me as the person that was independent, that you remember leaving the store, that grabbed the stuff that I needed, that checked out on my own and drove away on my own. Because if you're an HR manager and you have somebody come into you for an interview, I want you to remember that independent person that did something that you misjudged, so you don't misjudge somebody else coming into your office. We are not cripples. We are not dumb. We are not idiots. We are not the R word. It's not handicapped parking. It is disabled parking or preferably accessible parking. And we are people with disabilities. If you go into a room full of disability activists and say handicap parking, they will correct you one time. After that, people that are pros at navigating canes and power chairs suddenly get very clumsy with their equipment. Please be inclusive of us. The march last weekend, that is great to have intersectionality on issues, but there was no ADA coordinator. We were mentioned on the national page as the last issue, and then the state organizing page did not mention us, local pages did not mention us. There was no accessibility information provided. Some cities did organize locally to include accessibility, but it was not on a national level. Speakers didn't mention us. We were completely excluded. There was a march in Atlanta in 1990 when we were trying to get the ADA passed, which is great that many people with wheelchairs showed up. That is very hard to do given the architectural barriers for people with disabilities. But where are the allies? We have intersectional activism for every other issue except for disability rights. People with disabilities had the highest rate of poverty, the highest unemployment rate, the highest rates of abuse and exploitation, the highest rates of homelessness. We are at the greatest risk of losing critical services. We are being pushed out of public schools. We're the most vulnerable and most in danger, and we should not consistently be at the bottom of issues list for every organization and excluded altogether. We should be somewhere near the top. If you are a business owner on the board of an organization, if you work in HR, hire us. Don't make judgment calls about what you think and think we can't do. Please give us the same courtesy that you would give anyone else, and judge our experience like everyone else, and trust us to know our own limitations and abilities. And last of all, help us with city mapping. There is an app that you can download on any smartphone. It's called AXS Map, and you can rate a business based on its accessibility. And you can rate it according to not just the number of steps or its doorways or its bathrooms, but lighting for people that have visual impairments, and noise level for people with auditory or cognitive problems. And it actually links to Google, and it is included with the business's rating. So it makes you more cognizant of disability issues and also helps us. So the disability community needs to take better accountability for steering its own ship, but we still need allies. We cannot continue to fight these battles alone. There's still too many obstacles and too many barriers in our way to effectively organize a long-term movement by ourselves. It takes more than us continually yelling that we want to be accepted by society. We need others by our side as actively engaged in making us a part of it. Please download the app on your phones. Talk with me after the service about making events more inclusive, about providing disability sensitivity training. I am happy to provide you with my contact information, but we cannot continue to fight these fights by ourselves, and we need all of you on our team.